She figured she had a decent chance of getting away if she had to, but the mission would be a disaster, and Katerina hated failure. The bank wanted a live captive, and the price Blackhawk negotiated reflected the increased difficulty over a simple assassination. A dead Aragona meant the crew wouldn't get paid at all. This wasn't a dead or alive contract, and they'd have wasted time and resources on a pointless excursion, and that assumed everyone else made it out. Katerina had lived most of her life embracing a coldly calculating mentality, to consider the people around her as assets, expendable if it helped the mission succeed. But she knew she'd lost some of that keen edge, the almost inhuman coldness that marked a Sebastiani assassin. Against all her training and discipline, she'd become quite fond of her shipmates, and the thought of any of them dying on a blown mission was not something she wanted to contemplate. Ace was in the worst danger. Despite her efforts at discretion, Aragona's men knew she'd gone upstairs with their boss. They believed she was Ace's wife, sneaking off behind her husband's back, if they found their boss dead in the hotel suite. No, she had to get Aragona out of here and do it quietly, so Ace had a chance to slip away. When she first bought passage on Wolf's Claw, she couldn't understand why someone as coldly competent as Blackhawk had such a loudmouth fool as his sidekick. Her first impressions of people were usually spot on, but she eventually realized she'd misjudged Ace. Despite his loud and often annoying theatrics, she'd found him to be keenly intelligent and enormously reliable, and if she was being totally objective, not completely unattractive. No, she couldn't leave him at the mercy of Aragona's enraged retainers. She wouldn't, whatever it took.
"Why, Ara, are you trying to get me drunk?"
she purred softly, turning and running her hand on his face.
"Because I assure you that is not necessary."
She leaned back into him. "Your husband is a fool to neglect a woman like you." She felt his hands on her shoulders, his fingers slipping out of the thin straps of her dress. She moaned softly at his touch and leaned her head back, her silky hair pressed against his face.
"We'll see who the fool is. It's only a matter of when."
Blackhawk slipped through the dark streets, moving as quickly as he could without attracting notice. It was late, but Madrasa was known for its nightlife, so the restaurants, casinos, and clubs would be crowded until dawn. He tried to stay in the shadows and on back streets. He'd expected to be infiltrating the villa, and he was wearing combat fatigues and boots. He was filthy, too, his legs covered with half-dried mud from tramping around in the tidal estuaries. He'd managed to avoid any undue notice so far, but the minute he walked into the Grand Palais, every eye would be on him. The hotel was the finest establishment in Madrasa, and its patrons would be impeccably dressed. He looked around, his eyes scanning the late-night revelers walking by. He needed clothes, and he could only think of one way to get them. He watched and waited, looking for an appropriately dressed partier, preferably one around his size. Finally, he saw a man approaching. He was alone, and he looked to be a good physical match, and he was swaying back and forth, clearly drunk. Even better. Blackhawk waited for the man to walk by, and then he struck. He lunged forward, striking the back of the man's neck. His victim crumbled instantly, and Blackhawk caught him and slid his limp form into an alley. He put his fingers to the man's throat, feeling for a pulse. A look of relief slipped onto his face. He hadn't used a killing strike, but he'd been worried he'd hit too hard. Blackhawk had fought an astonishing array of cutthroats and killers, but he wasn't used to disabling drunk civilians. He stripped out of his fatigues and put on his victim's suit. It wasn't a perfect fit, but it would do. He picked up his assault rifle, looking around the alley for a place to stash it. Once again, his equipment for the villa had no place on the floors of the Grand Palais, and there was no way he could conceal it with these clothes. He walked over and shoved the rifle into a trash bin, carefully pushing it down under the garbage. He paused for a minute and sighed, unbuckling his holster belt and tossing it in after the rifle. He wasn't getting in with a pistol either. He turned and took a last glimpse at the man lying on the ground. He pulled a 10-crown platinum coin and placed it in his victim's hand. It was enough to buy 100 suits, compensation enough, he hoped, for both the clothing and the headache he knew the man would have when he awoke. Harker and Blackhawk was a lot of things, but a thief wasn't one of them. Okay, it's time. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do, but he knew he had to do it now. He took a breath and slipped out of the alley, heading swiftly through the streets toward the Grand Palais.
Luke,